Oh my god, it's here. The Speed Duel Battle City Box is here. Hallelujah. Well, okay, the box isn't here, but the spoilers, the full spoilers for the box are here. So, let's get into it. Hey Legos community, it's Terramaster, and welcome to part 2 of the full Battle City Box review. Today we have, starting off, a deck that I kind of talked about in part 1, and a link will appear right now to part 1 in case you haven't seen it yet and would like to. And this deck is actually created by somebody who joined me for a little bit of part 1. He could join me later in this little part of the review as well. And that is Lucas Gaylord, so shout out to him for that. And this is a little Monarch stun deck using 2 of the cards we mentioned when we were talking about Monarchs. But since they're both machines, I felt it would be fitting to introduce a smooth transition between the Monarch episode and the Machine episode by talking about a Machine Monarch deck, and that is Jinzo and Spell Canceller. So let's show you the replay since we've already talked about the cards that they involve. Now the skill you want to use in this deck is Inner Conflict, as you'll see in a minute here as I go ahead and put back my 5th card, take my 4,000, set the Giant Rat, and that's your turn. So your Giant Rat gets run over, you summon another Giant Rat, you draw for turn, you drew Zombina, which is great. Now let me explain this interaction while we're here. The Giant Rat can float into Zombina from deck, which can, when it's then destroyed, it can float into Giant Rat in the graveyard. So Giant Rat and Zombina go very, very well together. So that's actually a really good combo that was given to us by this box. Anyway, so whatever monster killed Giant Rat, you now Inner Conflict to take that. And you tribute it off for, now you have your options. See, I drew both in this opening hand. I drew Jinzo and Spell Canceller. So you can summon whichever one you think is more important to stun whatever you think your opponent's playing. So if you think they're playing a lot of quick play spells, you summon Spell Canceller. If you think they're playing traps, you summon Jinzo. It just depends on the matchup and what you're going against and how that deck typically looks like and what you think your opponent is running. But anyway, the point is that if that monster, so I went with Jinzo here for an example, if that monster survives your opponent's turn, and with Sphere Career, well, hopefully you can help it do that. Then on your next turn, if you still have the Giant Rat, boom, Spell Canceller, and now complete stun. That's why it's called Monarch Stun, absolute stun right there. No spells, no traps, your opponent only has monster effects to win. And on top of that, your monster effects are pretty damn sick too, because you have Zombina and you have Giant Rat, which float into each other perfectly. And as a backup plan, you see you have your typical Zoma stuff. So this deck is really, really good, really, really scary and dangerous. So look out for Machine Monarchs or Machine Arcs. I'm just going to show you the deck really fast here. You've got your 3 Giant Rats, like I said, and the 2 Zombina for those to float into each other. You've got your 3 Jinzo. The Newdoria is just a spicy little tech to give you an additional monster piece of monster removal in case that's something you need. But obviously your primary piece of main phase removal would be Soul Exchange. As you can see here, you can target one of your opponent's monster with Soul Exchange, and then you tribute it off for one of your 2 Monarchs, which are Jinzo to flood all the traps, and Spell Canceller to lock down all their spells. And for back row, really you can use whatever here, but we decided to go with Zoma the Spirit and Sphere Karibo. Now again, here's some good side deck options or other options for the deck. You can use an Apprentice Magician package if that's what you prefer for the floater package, which is Apprentice Magician, and I didn't put that in here, but Old Vindictive Magician. This is Dueling Book. I can do cool things like this. Old Vindictive Magician. And you've got something like Bones Alone, which we talked about in the last part of the review, where it just straight special summons itself from the hand to go ahead and give you tribute fodder immediately. You've got your DD Crow for any graveyard-centric strategies. You've got Dark Ruler Hades in case you need to swap out your Monarchs to get rid of like pesky monster effects in case your opponent has a lot of those. Obviously, you've got things you could run like Santa Claus if you need something. If your opponent has something that's untargetable for whatever reason or unaffected by spells, spellproof armor. You go ahead and tribute their monster, give them Santa Claus, and then you Soul Exchange it. So very good there. If you just feel like you want to go all in on the power and just build like beater conflict, kind of like what Warrior Conflict is, that's where you go Vorce Raider And obviously you can also choose to run this new skill, which is a great time for me to talk about it, and that's It's Jinzo. It says Jinzo monsters you control are unaffected by your opponent's skill cards. Once per turn during your main phase, if you control Jinzo, you look at one face down card in your opponent's spell and trap zone, and if it's a trap, you draw a card. Now this skill is absolutely phenomenal because it makes your Jinzo first off immune to skills, which means it's immune to inner conflict, which means it's immune to Cocoon of Ultra Evolution. It means it's immune to Twisted Personalities pop effect. So that makes the skill very good on its own, just having Jinzo be immune to a lot of powerful skills that are in the game. But in addition to that, you can also potentially get a +1 every single turn as long as your opponent has that a trap card set, because Jinzo won't allow that trap card to activate. So as long as they have that trap set, you can keep looking at it every turn and confirming, yep, it's a trap, draw, confirm it's a trap, draw. So really, really cool, really a lot of potential with that skill. You've got creature swap as an option, obviously, because if you creature swap and you give your opponent a floater or a Zombina, which is I guess also a floater, or you can even give them Nidoria. So that's a lot of shenanigans you can pull off with creature swap. And obviously I just put in the old Vindictive to go with the Apprentice if you want to do that floating package instead.
Hey guys, one card I quickly forgot, Lucas reminded me while I was editing, that I want to mention is Angel 07 to side deck for this deck. And that's because it's that if you run into a deck that depends heavily on monster effects and does not really use spells or does not really use traps, you want to go ahead and side in Angel 07 instead of either your Spell Canceller or your Jinzo, whatever you need to do in order to go ahead and make that part of your stun strategy here. So excellent side deck card. Lucas actually goes ahead and sides 3 of Angel 07, the build he's using right now. So just something to keep in mind there as a potential side deck option.
Alright, so since I already talked about the skill that this deck is going to have, this next deck that I have for you here, let me just get straight into the replay for you. So this is actually a pure Jinzo deck, as you'll see soon enough. So again, we're always going to assume we don't get what we want, so we're going first. We're summoning our Gear Frame, and we are searching for a Peacekeeper. Now let me explain these two cards really fast. We got two Machina monsters exactly in the Battle City box. We got Machina Gear Frame and Machina Peacekeeper. Now Machina Gear Frame searches for any Machina monster except another Gear Frame on normal summon. And in addition, it's also a generic machine union, so it can equip onto any machine and it protects it from destruction by destroying itself instead. Alright, and Peacekeeper is similar, has that similar union effect as a generic machine union, so it protects whatever it's equipped to. And in addition, when Peacekeeper is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add any one union monster from your deck to your hand. Now there's a lot more options to search Peacekeeper, to search with Peacekeeper, except Gear Frame and Peacekeeper. However, for right now, we're just going to say that Gear Frame searches Peacekeeper, and then Peacekeeper searches either Gear Frame or another Peacekeeper, depending on what you have, what you need. I'll go into the other Peacekeeper options after I go through talking about this deck. Anyway, so you got your Gear Frame out. You're going to set 2 back row to protect it, and then let's say you have to use a Shrink in order to fend off an attack from an opponent's monster. You kill that opponent's monster, and now you draw. There it is. You've got your Jinzo. So you tribute your Gear Frame now, and you summon that Jinzo, and right here, boom, you can activate the skill. I didn't do it. I got a little excited again about having Jinzo. And that skill, as long as your opponent has a back row that's a trap, it lets you look at that trap, confirm it's a trap, and then draw a card. So you pick up a Twin Barrel Dragon for essentially for free there. It also gives your Jinzo skill immunity, you'll see. And then let's say you use Book of Moon right there to protect your Jinzo once again. So draw phase, I drew a Jinzo, and now I finally decided, oh yeah, I gotta actually show the skill off in the video here. So yeah, so Jinzo monsters are unaffected by opponent's skill cards, and then if you control Jinzo, look at a face down card, and if it's a trap, draw a card. So that's what that extra draw was for. So once again, if your Jinzo survives and that trap is still there on your opponent's side of the field, another free draw. And now, this is where the deck gets truly, truly amazing, where you're getting essentially a draw once per turn now, an extra draw. And look at the amount of options that has given to you in just 2 turns of doing that, right? So if your opponent has a monster that you don't like, or you don't know what it is because it's face down, you play Soul Exchange and you summon another Jinzo. But you don't have to do that. if you want to pop their monster or another back row by summoning Twin Barrel Dragon and going for that 25% chance, which of course I missed here because I got a Tails, but whatever. And your third option is to just summon Peacekeeper and protect Jinzo from destruction one time to keep it alive, so that next turn you can continue plussing again. And furthermore, you have Shrink to have more protection for your Jinzo in case they try to summon something stronger than 2400 and going into it. This is like truly like amazing stuff that this deck can do, and that it constantly just gives you resource after resource after resource, especially with the Machinas and then the skill. So the Machinas will constantly search, and the skill will hopefully give you a once per turn draw. So this is truly a somewhat terrifying deck, frankly, because that Jinzo, remember, they have to remove it by battle or by card effect. They cannot remove it just by using their skill. They can't Inner Conflict take it. You know, they can't tribute it with their Cocoon. They can't pop it with Twisted Personality. So protecting with Peacekeeper is actually phenomenal. Like, there's so few outs to it once you do that. Anyway, let me explain the full deck now. Oh boy, alright, here is the deck. And this deck just feels like it's going to be a ton of fun to play. And I've got some cards to talk about here that I haven't talked about yet, so let's get into it. Obviously, you've got your Jinzos, which is your boss monster, and your key to activating your skill. It's Jinzo. You've got Psychic Shockwave, which is essentially a negate for a trap, which is, you know, amazing. It's essentially when your opponent activates a trap card, you discard a spell or trap, and special summon a level 6 Dark Machine monster from your deck. You know what's a level 6 Dark Machine monster? Jinzo is a level 6 Dark Machine monster. And when Jinzo is summoned, because let's say your opponent's trap is Chainlink 1, and you do Psychic Shockwave Chainlink 2, once Psychic Shockwave resolves, Jinzo's on the field, which means the Chainlink 1 trap is negated. So it's essentially a trap negate plus a special summon of a 2400 body that'll negate all other traps too. So absolutely phenomenal card right here. The Machina package that I discussed in the replay. So you've got your Gear Frame to search your Peacekeeper, and your Peacekeeper searches either Gear Frame or another Peacekeeper. You've got Spell Canceller in case of needing to negate spell cards in addition to trap cards. So it does have a slight stun element option here if that's what you want to go for. You've got Twin Barrel Dragon, like I showed you, which has a chance to be able to just pop anything, although this card I would say isn't really mandatory for the deck. It's just the deck is so versatile, you can go ahead and add this in if you want to. You've got your Book of Moons and your Shrink for protection from disgusting things like Conflict, which is still going to be around, you know. And just generally, it's very good to protect your Jinzo with quick play spells. You've got Soul Exchange to make summoning your Jinzo and your Spell Canceller very easy. And then I want to talk about Iron Draw. Now, because you're constantly searching machine monsters and you're drawing cards with your skill, it's Jinzo, Iron Draw, I think, has a very high possibility of being able to work with this deck. You still don't want it to be clogging your hand, but there's a very good chance, as I showed you in the replay, so many different options you have on your play after your first couple turns, is that it's very easy to envision multiple scenarios where you can have specifically 2 machine type monsters on the field, and then this is just Pot of Greed. So hey, awesome. Alright, so potential side deck cards and other options. I'm going to go slightly off topic of the specific deck here, because I want to talk about what I think is the best side deck card in the format that we're going to get, and that is Mind Crush. This is because Mind Crush, as long as you know a card name that's in your opponent's hand, it's going to go ahead and discard that card from their hand. Now, why is that so good? It's because of search effects. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about Mind Crush in this, after I talked about this deck, is because this deck is really the first time I've given you a deck with multiple search effects in the same deck, because your Gear Frame and your Peacekeeper, right? So if you're playing against this deck and they summon their Gear Frame, they search their Peacekeeper, you can Mind Crush and get rid of that Peacekeeper, and if they happen to have drawn another Peacekeeper, boom, that one is gone too. If they play Soul Exchange and you know you're playing Esparoba, it's probably a good bet to go ahead and chain that Mind Crush, call Jinzo, get that Jinzo out of their hand. So no matter how you know or what it takes for you to know what the play is, Mind Crush, as long as you know what's in their hand, you can go ahead and call that and get rid of that card before they use it. So it's like an amazing play disruption card that's going to come in a lot for a lot of these decks that I'm going to show you throughout this review series. Now that we're done heaping praise on Mind Crush, this deck I think should side deck Spellproof Armor. That way you would probably take out Spell Canceller if you're going to run Spell Canceller at all. I think that's more of an option card anyway. So if your opponent's running a lot of quick play spells and a lot of like offerings and hammer shot and stuff like that, you want to go ahead and do Spellproof Armor as your skill in game 2. You've got Blowback Dragon, which is a better Twin Barrel Dragon. So if you do side in Spellproof, maybe you want to side in Blowback Dragon to have an additional tribute monster and also an additional target for Psychic Shockwave. Since Psychic Shockwave is not limited to Jinzo only, it's just a level 6 Dark Machine monster. Blowback Dragon is a level 6 Dark Machine monster. So really cool there, and it's a lot more consistent than Twin Barrel because it's targets a card and then you toss a coin 3 times and destroy that target if at least 2 out of the 3 results are heads. So you only have to get 2 out of 3 heads rather than Twin Barrel, which is 2 heads out of 2. And then obviously some options for this deck. You can play Creature Swap, you can play Nobleman of Crossout, you can play Share the Pain. Here's something spicy. Share the Pain is also really good with Soul Exchange. If your opponent has 2 monsters, you activate Share the Pain, and you tribute your opponent's monster because of Soul Exchange, and then they have to tribute their other monster because of Share the Pain. So Soul Exchange and Share the Pain is a very cool, kind of spicy little 2-for-2 combo. Then you have Magnet Force, which I think is a decent card for all machine or rock decks to side deck. There is a rock deck in the box, we'll get to it. And the machine synergy here is obviously you want to protect your gear frame, your blowback dragon if you side that in, your twin barrel dragon, and your spell canceller from monster effects. Obviously, if you summon Jinzo, you can't play Magnet Force, but it's really good if you decide to go kind of away from its Jinzo. So maybe a side deck card. Obviously, you could play more Psychic Shockwave if you feel your opponent's playing a very trap-heavy deck and you want that automatic trap negate. And I think Rollout is also a decent option for this deck, whereas as long as you don't already have Jinzo on your field, you have any of these other machines, or you side into a little bit less of a Jinzo emphasis, you can go ahead and use Rollout in order to get your Peacekeeper from the graveyard onto your monster as a surprise, or your gear frame. So its surprise equips any union from your graveyard to an appropriate target, which for these Machina monsters is any machine monster. So you can surprise protect any of your machines, and if that's a Peacekeeper, you go ahead and grab that search off of Rollout as well. So just a lot of different options to consider there. Alright, let us keep rolling here, because the next deck is not based on a new skill, so there's no point in explaining anything. Let's just get right into the replay. Alright, so already we've got a nice new card to talk about. Now Book of Moon and Widespread Ruin are also new cards. Book of Moon I've already talked about. Widespread Ruin is when an opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy the attack position monster your opponent controls with the highest attack is your choice of tide. So it's a very good trap for going ahead and popping the biggest threat on your opponent's field. When they attack, it's a battle trap, which, you know, gives it a few weaknesses, but overall very good card because it's just straight destruction of their biggest monster. Book of Moon is just a very versatile card that we've been looking at and using. So this is a Spellproof Armor, Dark Spellproof Armor deck, and that's why this boy, Ally of Justice Clausolas, is in here, because I'm going to go ahead and activate Spellproof Armor here after I activate Summoner's Art to grab another copy of that, and here we go, Spellproof Armor. So once I move it to the right spot, Spellproof Armor is all machine monsters you control unaffected from spell effects, and here you normal summon machine normal monster with 1 less tribute. So level 6 only requires 1 tribute usually, and you can summon it for no tributes with Spellproof Armor. Here's where I've been saying for so long that machine decks lack attack points, they lack power, and my god did we get power. We got a 2300 normal summon that is unaffected by spell cards. Like, wow. So you just drop that 2300 on your first turn, you give it double back row protection. Let's say you have to pop your Book of Moon for whatever reason, right? And you draw, and now you have a Lord of Darkness, which is draw power. So I'm not going to be greedy. I'm going to draw 2. I'm going to banish that second Clausolas, because I'm going to go greedy again here to go with the Twin Barrel Dragon. But you don't have to be greedy. You can just summon 2 of these big birds. It's amazing. It is truly amazing. This deck is extremely powerful, and you saw here 23 plus 17 is 4,000. This is no joke and nothing to be messed around with. Let's take a look at the full deck. Alright, so here's an absolutely terrifying deck that we just saw that can normal summon a 2300 that's immune to spells. So you're playing your Spellproof Armor, you're playing your Big Bird Machine, Ally of Justice, a Colossus, and you have got Dekoichi for draw power as your options. You've got Twin Barrel Dragon, since that's a really good new dark machine as well, and you want to make this dark because you want to have that additional draw power. With Allure of Darkness, you gotta have Jinzo because that is the boss monster for all the machines, and because you want to run Psychic Shockwave to be a trap negating trap, essentially. You've got your Protection Quick Plays in Book of Moon and Shrink. You've got Widespread Ruin, which is a protection trap in case you're in a mirror match of some kind. And you can pop their Clausolus if that happens. And one more thing about Clausolus, it's a level 6 dark machine. You know what that means? That means Psychic Shockwave can target it even if you happen to draw all your Jinzos. So that is really cool. That's the core deck I'm going with right now, but there is a ton of options for this deck. I mean, so many options. You can play Blastsphere if the meta turns into everybody summoning a big monster, and then if you Blastsphere them, you really destroy them. You've got Blowback Dragon, which obviously you can sub into any of these machine decks if you need it. You can play more Jinzos, you can just side into its Jinzo, like how the its Jinzo deck sided into Spellproof Armor. You can play the Machina package, you can play Spell Canceller, you can play general tech cards like Noble Mana Cross Out, more Shockwave. You can even have trap monsters if you feel like you're lacking tribute fodder. And one thing I didn't put on here is obviously for tribute fodder, you can also play Soul Exchange if that's the direction you feel like the deck needs to go. Now I'm going to make a pretty bold prediction here, and that is that dropping a 2300 normal summon that's searchable by Summoner's Art is so good that I honestly believe Spellproof Armor is going to be top tier. Or some kind of machine deck is going to be top tier that has Jinzo with it. And whether that's going to be its Jinzo, Spellproof Armor with Clausolus, or both. A dark machine deck is going to be top tier. You can also obviously play something like Magnet Force as well if that's what you think you need. Because if there's a lot of monster effect shenanigans going on. You can also go ahead and play a new card I haven't talked about yet, is Heavy Mech Support Platform. Now that is the perfect transition for me to get into all those other Union targets for your Machina Peacekeeper to search. One more card I forgot to mention earlier, which I will now, is technically a machine support card. It's Machine King 3000 BC. Honestly, this reminds me that I'm kind of surprised we didn't get more actual Machine King monsters, but we got the trap monster for Machine, named after Machine King, which is, okay. So special summons itself as a 1000 attack and defense, level 4 Earth Machine. Then essentially it blocks your summoning for the rest of the turn it's summoned, so you would have to do it on your opponent's turn or your opponent's end phase, whatever, to have any kind of follow-up to it. And then it just allows you to tribute a machine monster and just boost itself up. So honestly, I don't see this card being good. You never know. It could be good if somebody finds some kind of a way to where making just one trap monster have a ton of attack points by tributing something. You never know what kind of interactions could come up there, but as far as I can think of, there doesn't seem to be anything. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting cards left and right. I'm so sorry. Real quick, one last card is, since you play a lot of Jinzo here, for all these decks that do rely heavily on Jinzo, you can go with the Amplifier strategy if you want to. So if Spellproof Armor is really, really like heavy meta, then Amplifier could actually be really, really good, which means that if you have Jinzo, Amplifier essentially, once it's equipped to Jinzo, it only negates your opponent's traps and not yours. So that frees you up to make your Jinzo immune to monster effect by playing something like Magnet Force, which could be like amazing, right? If you combine Amplifier, Jinzo, Spellproof Armor, and Magnet Force, your Jinzo is pretty much indestructible, do I dare say? Anyway, just really, really cool that that combo there I kind of wanted to point out. Right, now that I've gone through a bunch of decks, I would be absolutely remiss if I did not talk about heavy metal raiders in a machine-themed episode where I've talked about a lot of dark machine monsters. So we've got Heavy Metal Raiders here. Essentially, it's very synergizes very well with all kinds of dark machines, makes your dark machines unable to destroy a battle once per turn, and then if a monster that is a dark machine destroys one of your opponent's monsters, you can special summon one dark machine type monster from your hand. Anyway, let me show you some of the cards, other than obviously the dark machine type monsters we already talked about. Some of the other cards new cards that kind of support Heavy Metal Raiders or can be used in the Heavy Metal Raiders deck are these right here. You've got Soul Exchange, since a lot of the more powerful dark machine type monsters we got are level 6 especially. So you look at Blowback Dragon, Jinzo, and Ally of Justice, Clausolus. You can Soul Exchange to get easier access to your best monsters with Heavy Metal Raiders. And then they're protected by battle, and then if you manage to go ahead and swing in with all those monsters, or as far as Blowback Dragon goes, even if it manages to destroy something by effect, then you can start spamming the field like I talked about, so pretty good there. You've got Magic Drain, which since I'm predicting spells are going to be a big part of like back row meta or removal meta in general, running Magic Drain, or I'm going to go ahead and bring in Ryoku Field here too, which stops targeting spells for absolutely free, whereas Magic Drain, your opponent can stop it by discarding a second spell if they have one. So protection from spells could end up being really important in a deck like this, and especially for Magic Drain, it could be really important to protect your Heavy Metal Raiders, since Cosmic Cyclone is likely going to be the primary back row hate card that's played that can get rid of something like Heavy Metal Raider. And you've got something like Iron Draw, which, since your monsters are so survivable with Heavy Metal Raiders on the field, is that they are not destroyed once per turn by battle, can actually potentially take very good advantage of Iron Draw, where you summon a monster, it lives, or you just summon a monster and it destroys an opponent's monster, you spam, so you already have 2 monsters, which sets up your Iron Draw perfectly, whether it's a card effect destruction, which is amazing, right? Because then you spam and Pot of Greed Iron Draw right away, or it destroys a monster in battle, which sets up your Iron Draw for next turn, whether both monsters survive, or if only one survives, then you can just go ahead and drop another one on your next turn. Going similar to that, you have Mirror Wall, which is also very cool. Now, your monsters won't be destroyed with battle anyway, but where Mirror Wall can come in is that it can actually allow you to not take damage from an attacking monster, as well as it can allow your monster to then destroy their monster, which means you spam from your hand on your opponent's turn, giving you kind of a big head start there. And the final card I want to talk about is Swamp Mirror. Now, I know Quantum Cat has essentially the same effect, but I wanted to emphasize Swamp Mirror just because it's better, in that this deck, Heavy Metal Raiders, would more probably prefer to have a aggressive monster with some attack power, rather than have some kind of a monster that only serves as a wall. So Swamp Mirror can turn into a dark machine, and then it gains the full benefit of the Heavy Metal Raiders skill. Heavy Metal Raiders, is it going to be top tier? Probably not, and that's just because you have to protect it from Cosmic Cyclone, which I think is going to be played fairly often. So in Cosmic Cyclone, banishing your skill just pretty much ends the game, especially because you're starting with one less card in your hand, which is also something the skill says at the end there, which is the drawback of the skill. Alright, now before I get to the final big deck sample and replay of the video, I want to do what I promised, which is talk about additional targets for Machina Peacekeeper, other than just itself and Gear Frame. So the big one I want to just talk about standalone, because it's not part of the deck I'm going to show, is Heavy Mech Support Platform. It's a dark machine, so that's a potential synergy there with that dark spellproof deck, if that's what you want to go with. It's got 500 attack and defense, and what's good about that, this card specifically, is not only does it have that destruction protection that all these Union monsters do, but it also goes ahead and boosts your whatever it's equipped to, the machine monster, by 500. So what's really good about potentially that is it could help you get over something without having to play something very specific. And in addition, it could also be a good sort of like battle step attack boost, like with rollout. Interesting things to consider there is you could even make a pure Union deck just using generic machines and protecting them from destruction, and having them be spellproof with spellproof armor. So a lot of different options here, and of course, since Heavy Mech support platform is dark, it also kind of works with Heavy Metal Raiders. Now that we've talked about that, gotten that out of the way, we need to talk about the main Union deck. Now this Union deck, of course, is built around
Seto Kaiba one of his boss monsters in Battle City, and that is the XYZ-Dragon Cannon. Now, Union combination, I'm going to read the skill first because of how important the skill is to the deck. Kaiba skill, of course, and it's during the main phase. Once per turn, you can fusion summon a light machine fusion monster, which XYZ-Dragon Cannon is, from your extra deck using monsters from your graveyard or field as fusion material. Now, this card is worded kind of confusingly, and the final product may be worded differently, but from what I've heard on the ruling side of it, including from Alam Lion, who is like the go-to for speed duel rulings as far as I'm concerned, is that you can go ahead and banish the materials from your graveyard to summon the XYZ Dragon Cannon or the little pieces that go along with it, which we'll talk about in a minute here. And so for the rest of this turn, your opponent takes no damage. So it does have that drawback where it can't be used for OTK purposes. But if you take a look at XYZ Dragon Cannon here, what you can do with it is you can go ahead and use it to just pop everything on your opponent's side of the field, clear all their back row, all their monsters. So you can pretty much you can't kill them this turn, but you can pretty much set up to go in for the kill next turn. So a lot of interesting things you can go in with there. But before we get into a deck, let me actually get into the cards themselves. Oh, I'm supposed to keep the skill up. Oops. Okay. There we go. So we have the three pieces, individual pieces, which are going in your main deck. You have X Head Cannon, a vanilla 1800 light machine, Y Dragon Head, a effect level 4 Union light machine, and Z Metal Tank, which is also a level 4 Union light machine effect monster. X Head Cannon has a decent stat line, and Y Dragon Head and Z Metal Tank are very good to, for one thing, power up X Head Cannon and protect it from being destroyed. Z Metal Tank also protects your Y Dragon Head and protects it from being destroyed in addition to boosting it. So Y Dragon Head will boost X Head Cannon by 400, and Z Metal Tank will boost X or Y by 600. So Z is very good to equip. And now let's get into the little two-piece fusions here. You already saw the big boss monster XYZ Dragon Cannon, which takes all three of these. So we talk about the little two ones. Now, the big one can target any card on the field. These have specific requirements as to what they can target. I guess there are more restrictions. So if you look at XY Dragon Cannon, it can only target face-up spells and traps. So, relevant things to target there would be things like Zoma or field spells or whatever continuous spells and traps end up being relevant to the new meta. And then you've got XZ Tank Cannon, which targets face down spells and traps. So this is how you get rid of back row, specifically back row that your opponent would like to activate in the battle phase. So something like Widespread Ruin, or if going way back, something like Shrink or whatever attack point manipulation, where like you just force them to activate it and then you don't have to worry about it. Even with a Book of Moon, this XZ Tank Cannon, it's got 2100 defense, so it's not exactly the easiest thing to get over once it gets Book of Moon. We've got YZ Tank Dragon, which is a 2100. So another thing is for the attack points of all these, they're literally going to be what the combined attack points would be if the two individual monsters used to summon them, with one equipped to the other. So for example, XY is the same as X equipped to Y, 2200, and XZ is the same as X equipped by Z, which is 2400. And same thing here, YZ is basically Y equipped by Z, which is 2100. I think the same thing goes for their defense as well. Yes, as I look at it, that is correct. All right. So YZ Tank Dragon, anyway, this is probably the easiest one to summon, which I'll explain once I get into the deck. And that's because, I'll get into that. And its effect is it targets face down monsters your opponent controls. So all those pesky little set monsters, it'll get rid of them. All those floaters, it'll get rid of them. All those monsters that activate when they're destroyed by battle, it gets rid of them very, very nicely. However, this is also the easiest one to play around since it's the easiest one to summon. But let me talk more about that as I show you the replay and the deck. All right, we are here with the Union deck replay. Let's go. Opening hand, setup speed duels. And Humble Tea set right there. Now, here's what's really cool. Metaverse is a new card that can go ahead and let you search a field spell. And that is going to be, I think, used in quite a few decks, including Unions, and you'll find out why in a minute. And I'll also explain the Night Assailant, probably when I show off the deck. Alright, so here, Night Assailant just pops a monster. Metaverse and End Phase to search your Union Hanger. Yep. we got Union Hanger. So Union Hanger, it searches upon activation for a light Union monster. And then when a light Union monster is summoned, it equips another light Union monster to that summoned monster. So the main target for Union Hanger is Y-Dragon Head. Now you see I drew one, but this is why you gotta run at least two. Also, Foolish Burial is an amazing draw here, because Foolish Burial is also a new card. Before I get to it, let me just mention. And Foolish Burial is used in this deck to go ahead and bury your X-Head Cannon, whatever piece pretty much you need to bury, because the skill allows you to use it from your graveyard as fusion material, right? And then you activate your Hanger, you grab your second Y-Dragon Head, you pop that one out of the field, you equip your Z-Metal Tank second one from your deck, and now look at the options you have. You can go pretty much into any of the fusions that you want. You can go YZ, you can go XZ, and you could even go XY, but that would be kind of a waste of your Z, since Union Hanger does have a restriction of the monster that you equip can't be summoned the same turn that you equip it. Anyway, so let's say you decide to go big, or first, okay, there's also the option that you could go small, where your Y-Dragon Head is boosted by your Z-Metal Tank and protected from destruction once. So you could just go with the old attack for 2100, but there's also the option of going big for banishing all three and summoning your XYZ-Dragon Cannon. Here you have 2 cards left in your hand, so you go ahead and discard both to pop 2. Now, whether or not your XYZ-Dragon Cannon survives, you're going to, if you're drawn to Union Scramble, that is absolutely phenomenal. That is your follow-up play, because you just have to set it, and then you go ahead and pop off with that Union Scramble. It's the perfect follow-up because it targets up to 3 of your banished machine type normal and or light machine type Union monsters. So basically, it's in our format meant to summon X, Y, or Z. Once you essentially recycle all of them once you've used them as fusion materials, and now you can just go ahead and fuse again. And I know I declared the skill, but you don't even have to use the skill if they're all in the field. If they all survive, you would only have to use the skill if one of them dies for some reason. Tons of options, lots of removal, very, very consistent in summoning your boss monsters. Let's take a look at the full deck. Alright, so here's that deck. So you've got your 3 Night Assailants. Now, here's what I'm going to explain Night Assailant here, which is that you want 3 Night Assailants because your boss monsters all have a discard 1 card as the cost to activate their effects. So that's why Night Assailant is so good, because when Night Assailant is sent from the hand to the graveyard, you target a flip effect monster except that specific card and you return it to your hand. So as long as you have another Night Assailant in the graveyard, once you discard that second Night Assailant, you just recycle the other one. And if you manage to pull this off, you have infinite discards, so you can pop as many cards on your opponent's side of the field as you want without worrying about losing any resources. So that is amazing with this deck. And obviously you have your X, Y, and Z pieces. I went with 2 each, but the ratios of that, obviously, again, this is just a conflict, this is not a conflict, but this is just a concept build, so the ratios can always be messed around with until it gets optimized. Maybe it never gets optimized. It just depends on what the meta is, right? So for protection, I went ahead and did triple Book of Moon, only because, like I said in the preview of the replay, that YZ Tank Cannon is the easiest to summon, because like you saw with Union Hanger, you primarily search your Y-Dragon Head, and then when you summon it, you equip your Z-Metal Tank to it. So YZ is the easiest access you have, and YZ pops face down monsters. So that combines pretty well with Book of Moon. So that's why I decided to go triple Book of Moon for protection in this deck. There's a lot of protection options. Then you've got Metaverse, because Union Hanger is so crucial to get 2 of your pieces out right away. I'm essentially running 5 Union Hangers by running 2 Metaverse. Yes, 2 of them are slower, but that is completely fine, because Night Assailant is a good set pass play as well, like you saw in the replay. And then there's Foolish Burial, which is usually to set up your X-Head Cannon, since that one is not searchable, to set it up in your graveyard. Or if you draw X-Head Cannon, and if you don't need to do that, you can also Foolish Burial your Night Assailant if you already have a second one in your hand, in order to set up that discard loop. So Foolish Burial is very, very good in this deck, and it's probably going to be in other decks as well. So keep an eye on Foolish Burial popping up a lot more in this review series. You've got Union Scramble here, which, like I showed you, is your follow-up play. So it basically recycles everything you banish to perform your fusion summon, but in addition to that, except the turn it was sent to the graveyard, you banish it from the graveyard, then target one of your banished light machine monsters or Union monsters and return it to the hand. So not only does it recycle from Banish onto the field, but it can also just recycle from your hand. So Union Scramble essentially gives you 2 follow-ups. So as long as you're like at least keeping even in the resource battle, Union Scramble will replenish your resources so quickly and like at such a high degree that you'll probably have the advantage in the late game. Now, in the side deck, as you can see, there are a million different options you could play with unions. So obviously you could go with the generic unions, which are the Machinas and the Heavy Mech support platform. If you think that'll help, if you think your fusion monsters need that extra protection and you find a consistent way to bring that out, like by playing Frontline Base or by playing, Rollout. So whatever you think you need to do in order to get that going. Frontline Base can also just be good to just spam the field more with which includes you can normal summon your X at cannon and then special summon with Frontline Base your Y or your Z. So whatever you want to do there. Iron Draw I think has a lot of potential because especially with say your Union Scramble, with say your ability to fuse anytime pretty much with field or graveyard using your skill, it's really easy to manipulate having 2 effect monsters, exactly machines, on the field. So at that point it just becomes pot of greed. I just couldn't think of how to squeeze it into this particular deck, but I think it's very playable in the deck. Machine Assembly Line is just an interesting machine card. If the meta becomes really slow, then this has some potential because it not only does it boost all machines on the field by 200, it also gets 2 junk counters each time a machine monster on the field is destroyed, which means that you can then send it to the graveyard and then you can summon a machine monster equal or lower than the number of junk counters you had. So let's say 2 machines get destroyed. Now you can special summon a level 4 machine monster anytime you want during your main phase with Machine Assembly Line. And if 3 machines get destroyed, you could even use it with one of those level 6 machines we've talked about earlier. And then the next 2 options are obviously just Back Row Hate, Extermination, and Cosmic Cyclone. So if you feel like the deck needs more Back Row Hate, if you're losing to big trap cards a lot or big quick play spells, then maybe you go this route. If you feel like you need more attack point protection, there's things like Shrink. There's also things like Mirror Wall. But obviously I didn't want to show Mirror Wall just because you always have to be cautious about how much Jinzo is being played. Then there's also Formation Union. With this, I think is more of just like a meme card because I'll let you read the effect if you want to pause it, read on your own. But I don't think this card is very good. It doesn't do a lot. Machine King 3000 BC, like I talked about earlier. If this is something that you find an abusable combo with, go for it. Magnet Force, like in all these machine decks, it basically makes you immune to monster effects for a turn. Could be very solid. Here's a big one. Despite Spellproof Armor, now unless Spellproof Armor is like absolutely like top tier 1, I do expect quick play spells to be a big part of the meta, but do remember that Spellproof Armor could scare a lot of that to go into traps. But regardless, if that is the case, then Rare Metamorph is your best friend in this deck, in my opinion. Because I think it's better than Magic Drain or Ryoku Field for this specific deck. And that's because with Rare Metamorph, you can protect your big boss monster once. And not only that, you can also use it for your tiny monsters if you need to go ahead and give them that 500 boost. It's a very versatile card, and with this deck, which is a very versatile deck that you can have so many options with what you can do, you can use Rare Metamorph to your advantage very good, especially because this deck does not play Jinzo, where most of the other machine decks I've talked about at least consider playing Jinzo. So unless you were to go away from Jinzo, you can't protect your Jinzo with Rare Metamorph. So very cool card there. And I already talked about Rollout. And then finally, if you feel like you need more trap protection, because Spellproof Armor is top tier, then you do want to play something like Widespread Ruin in that case, or some other protection traps, whatever you can come up with. Alright, before I end the machine part of this review series, I quickly want to give a shout out to some cute light machine monsters that aren't XYZ, and that is these boys right here: Victory Viper XX03, Ducker Mobile Cannon, Jade Knight, and Falchion B. Now, Victory Viper and Falchion B function when they destroy a monster by battle. They give you different effects to choose from. I'll let you read the cards on their own. This was a funny, I think, like kind of meme deck way back in the day. And I think even also it was like halfway decent in Duel Links for a hot minute. That's that. Jade Knight is an additional option to search either any of these, your Victory Viper or your Falchion B, as well as it can search your X, Y, and Z if something comes up with that, who knows. Then there's Ducker Mobile Cannon. which is really just a flip search for any level 4 recycle from your graveyard. That, you know, I think it's more meme again than anything else, but like I said, we got a lot of decent equip cards, which I'll talk about later, so you never know, this deck could actually pan out as well. Who knows what a new meta, right? Anyway, guys, that's it for the machine part of the review. I'm going to get ready to pump out the next one, which is going to be based on Magnet Warriors is what we'll start with, because we're going to go from machines to rocks. And then maybe after that, the rest of that video will be focused on everything else we got for Yami Yugi. Hope that sounds good. I will catch you for the Yami Yugi part of the review. Terra Master out.